Welcome back to the Larson Show, live at CPAC today, 2018, and glad to be with you, and always glad to welcome back to the program the great author and columnist, Miss Ann Coulter. I remember back at when they used to hold CPAC in Washington, D.C., and Ann Coulter would come walking through, but I guess she doesn't come to CPAC anymore. So, Ann,
I remember when CPAC wasn't funded by the Koch brothers and the Chamber of Commerce. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, but whoever funds it, I still get to talk to John Bolton. He's a good, solid conservative. There are a lot of good,
all you want to do is be at war constantly and don't care about this country, he's fantastic.
Oh, come on, Ann. Okay, we'll get into your column then. How are we going to cut the mass shootings in half in America?
Why, I'm glad you asked, Lars Larson. It turns out the plan for that was in Trump's very first immigration policy paper, which was not titled, Don't Worry, Wall Street, I've Got Your Back, was not titled Jared's Plan to Reorganize the Government. No, it was an immigration plan to make America great again, build a wall, deport illegals, totally shut down any new immigrants coming in. It turns out that a stunning number, and particularly of the most spectacular mass shootings, are committed by immigrants, something the media hides from us. I went through, comparing apples to apples, the sort of mass shootings that we saw last week and that terrify people, stranger walking into a public place and shooting it up. I describe which sorts of things were excluded. I do have a word limit, but I promise you if I had expanded the type of mass shooting I was talking about, immigrants would have lapped us there too. But not, a man killing his whole family. Not, this is how a mass shooting is typically defined, the way I defined it. And that is a stranger walking into a public place and opening fire, leading to 4 or more deaths. And in those, nearly 50% of them in the last 20 years, well, since 2000, have been committed by immigrants. Again, something that is hidden from us. I mean, if you cut those out, how about just cutting down the number of mass shootings we have? I think everyone has this feeling, wow, they seem to have gone up a lot recently. We didn't really have them in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s. It's really gone up recently. Yeah, that's because we're now bearing the fruit of Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act with the immigrants from extremely different, I would say dysfunctional cultures, but if we want to be non-judgmental about this, they are certainly very, very different cultures from our own, pouring in at an enormous rate, and the children of those immigrants are coming into their own now. So, I mean, just some of the most spectacular, like Fort Hood and San Bernardino. And they are far from all Muslims, but the Muslims do commit some of the big ones. The two most deadly mass shootings in U.S. history. I'm not counting Las Vegas, since all we've gotten is lies about that, so we know absolutely nothing about it until we know anything truthful that can't be categorized or analyzed. Were the Virginia Tech shooting by an immigrant and the Orlando shooting at the Pulse nightclub by the child of an immigrant. All people who never would have been here but for Teddy Kennedy pouting in his room and refusing to come out until the Kennedy family came up with his own legacy. He needed a legacy, and that was going to be, instead of civil rights for African Americans and people who have gotten the short end of the stick for a couple hundred years in this country, people we owe something to, we'll have civil rights for the entire world. Everyone in the world has a right to come here, and we have to support them. It's like the belief of some weird hippie cult, and now it's bearing fruit. Most people haven't noticed it because, I mean, you read through my list of the 47% of all mass shootings since 2000 being committed by immigrants and second-generation immigrants, first- and second-generation immigrants, and you probably haven't heard of half of them. But those of us who care about immigration and how the country is being transformed in the greatest demographic shift in the history of the world, that is according to the Migration Policy Institute and anyone with a pair of eyes, no country has simply changed what it is like this before. We didn't do it voluntarily. The American people weren't asked. It was being done to benefit. Well, Teddy Kennedy gets his legacy. The Democrats get, a whole lot of voters. They just, it's not really fair that they just get to bring in people to vote for them any more than it would be fair for Republicans to find, 60 million people. We're just going to throw the elections. We need another 60 million votes here. And now benefiting, that's right, the people sponsoring the convention you're going to, the Koch brothers.
Yeah, well, I understand. There's a lot of guilt to go around on that one because I understand why big business and Main Street America not Main Street, but big business loves the idea of cheap, abundant labor to not only provide the direct, cheap, abundant labor that illegal aliens do or even legal aliens do, but also to hold down the wages of the rest of us who are already here. But did you find anything when you researched this to indicate why first and second generation immigrants tend to be involved in almost half of all the mass shootings since 2000?
Well, I've written about it before. A lot of them, another point I made in my column is once you take out all the first and second generation immigrants, a very distinct pattern emerges of actual American mass killers. They're 99% young males, obviously paranoid schizophrenics, or as the media is now calling paranoid schizophrenia, autism. I feel sorry for all these autistics out there. That's a euphemism now for schizophrenic. They have faraway stares. They frighten classmates. Everybody sees it coming. I mean, look at Jared Loughner and James Holmes and this latest kid. 1 million warning signs all over. If we could just, get it down to that, it would be easier to deal with. And the point I started with is as incompetent and politically correct as the FBI is, when you're dumping millions of third world immigrants on the country, and the FBI is basically required to assign, 5 FBI agents to watch half of them. That kind of eats up the FBI's resources. Last year, James Comey, the director of the FBI, well, everyone knows, and it turns out, total show voter, but he testified before Congress that there are ISIS investigations in all 50 states. And ISIS is just one terrorist organization. How can the FBI possibly? They have watch lists on top of watch lists with 1 million names on them. How can the FBI keep their eyes keep a watch on millions of third world psychotic and often terrorist immigrants, and also keep an eye on the Jared Loughners, the James Holmes, the Adam Lamses, and the Nicholas Cruzes? Well, they can't do it. Could we just stick to our own homegrown psychotics?
By the way, Ann, I just got word, new development in the Florida shooting. I mean, after the really abject failure of the FBI, the local sheriff now has admitted the armed deputy assigned to the school to protect the school waited outside the building and never went inside the building until the rest of the team showed up. He has now resigned from his job. But imagine this. All those folks last night at that meeting who said, we trust the police to protect us. You had an armed deputy at the school. The new thinking after Columbine was if there's an active shooter, you go in and you confront him immediately. You've got a man who is assigned to protect the school. And he sits outside and says, I'm not going in there. There's a guy with a gun in there.
Among the reasons the armed guard idea is utterly idiotic. We don't need to hire someone new. The first thing the psycho does if he wants to shoot up a school is, I know, step 1, shoot the armed guard. I mean, why do you want the person who's going to be defending you, on notice? Here, kill me first. No, what you want is to allow people who are trained in concealed carry to have their guns at school.
And I'm live at CPAC. That's Ann Coulter, and you've got the Larson Show.
Well, Ann Coulter, of course, best-selling author. Her latest book, In Trump We Trust. You should get that book if you haven't read it yet. Also, make sure you follow her on Twitter, Ann Coulter at Twitter. And her new column comes out tomorrow. You go to anncoulter.com, her website. Got a lot of stuff up there. You get the new column there. Ann Coulter, how you doing?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Mark Simone?
Very good. Twitter took out a lot of followers last night.
What do you mean?
They did a little purging. I lost like 1,000 followers. I see a lot of people lost followers. They must have found some Russians or something there.
I've heard of that. And, One of the Twitter sites I go to, mostly because he runs lots of pictures of cute beagles.
Oh, God.
Beagles.
Oh, my God.
There was a warning on his site. I mean, he does do a lot of political stuff, but it's mostly for the beagle pictures I go there.
Oh.
And I clicked on his feed, and there was like a Twitter warning. It's the first time I've encountered that, and I've heard people have told me that, they can, like, shadow mute you. It's really getting out of control. I think these entities, Facebook and Twitter, they kind of need to be treated like public utilities if they are going to start doing the censorship here, which obviously is what the media is dying for. I think most people, no one under 50 watches TV anymore. Most people hear talk about, say, a shooting in Parkland, and they don't turn on MSNBC to find out what. They don't turn on CBS to find out what happened. They go on the internet.
Yeah, and even Peter Thiel, Silicon Valley genius, said he's pulling away from all of these people because he said they don't realize how much they're going to have to be regulated at some point.
Yes, and I must say they're bringing it on themselves. The whole idea of the internet was that it was the Wild West, and you'd have this unfettered free speech. But now, at least from what I've heard, I never really check things like that, Twitter analytics. I don't even particularly look at responses. I just make my pronouncements to the world and then move on. But I've heard it's gotten pretty aggressive and that it's being run by social justice warriors.
Well, but that's tradition. That's the way TV news is run. You ever watch Lester Holt's Nightly News? That was the most biased half hour. Hey, also, look at that gut-wrenching video, the mother who buried her child, and she's screaming into the camera, Mr. President, do something. It's the most emotional thing. But if you think if Obama was president, we'd be seeing that video all day and night?
Yeah, I noticed as soon as Obama became president, we stopped hearing about Cindy Sheehan.
Yeah.
Remember her?
Yeah.
No, Obama sent more troops to Afghanistan, and utterly pointless. You can't even call it a war. It's just, let's send some Americans to be killed for no reason whatsoever. Of course, your president promised to end these pointless wars. I have gotten some warnings from Twitter. Sorry, my door is open.
You got warnings from Twitter?
Hang on. But the hilarious thing is they're mostly from German Twitter.
Oh.
Because I really love getting pointers on my phraseology from Nazi countries.
You got warnings?
Yeah, well, apparently what happens is people can just, they review it and then say, we see nothing wrong with this tweet. Oh. But then I'll get that exact same report for the exact same tweet over and over again, which I keep meaning to write to Jack Dorsey and say, I think this reporting system of yours itself violates the terms of Twitter. You are harassing me.
It's like you're in school getting these warnings from the principal. So, hey, the president's talking about some sort of change in gun regulations. Bump stocks or raising the age or something. But that's a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea. The one thing that I suppose they could do, it's not. I don't think it's going to do anything, but I don't think anybody would mind a regulation on these bump stocks because no one's ever heard of them before. So, if you have to throw some utterly useless gesture at people who don't seem particularly interested in reducing the number of school shootings, then that would be the way to go. Anything else, as I tweeted earlier today, any Republican who goes along with some new gun restriction now is basically admitting, I decided not to do anything after that Newtown shooting. Even though I knew this would help, I wouldn't agree to it. I'm in the pocket of the NRA. Look, they knew it wasn't going to work before. That's why we've been against it. I think the point is we want to reduce the number of these shootings. And as you will see in my column being launched later tonight, one big step in that regard would be an immigration moratorium. on close examination, which took an enormous amount of research, I'm not sure how many, a quarter, a third of mass shootings are committed by first and second generation immigrants. And of course, the most deadly shootings were by immigrants at Virginia Tech and the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. You take those out of the equation, and it becomes a much simpler problem to solve. It's in every one of these cases. I mean, I shouldn't laugh. It's horrible, but it's the exact same description with everyone around the usually young man saying, yeah, he heard voices no one else heard. He scared us. Often the tattoo parlor operators are our first responders here. They're the ones who are saying, whoa, that's going to be the next school shooting. You see this over and over and over again. Why have mass shootings gone up? And they certainly seem to have. In fact, I think they certainly have in the last 20 years. Well, suddenly the results of Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act, immigrants and the children of immigrants are getting involved in the act or coming in their own. And also, of course, in the 70s, I mean, Trump was absolutely right about this. It became much basically impossible to involuntarily commit someone. And if you're terrified of this mental health stuff, we're not talking about, girls with bulimia or agoraphobia. We're talking about very specific conditions, paranoid schizophrenia. And basically you need, short commitments and then just to make sure they take their medicine. Because they're going to get guns. The guns are out there. The idea that you can ban guns in America. I was looking at a map on Business Insider last night. I may tweet it later, of gun ownership by state. And it may seem very simple in a place like New York City. Oh, you only have to gather up about 1,000 guns. No, in Montana, 70% of the population have guns. In most states, I'd say it's about 30%. And consider that's generally, one person per household. Other than freaks like us in New York City, most people do live in households with other people. So you have to double or triple that for the access that the wife has to her husband's gun and the child has to the gun. No, guns are the things that keep us safe. And I suppose I can't say anything about mass shootings or any kind of shooting without throwing out the single most stunning statistic, which is 98% of all these mass shootings take place in gun-free zones.
Really?
Yeah, 98%. Remember, I don't know if you remember this. It was particularly telling. James Holmes, again, you could see from 50 yards. Psycho. And by the way, it could probably totally be taken care of with the right medicine, as doctor friends of ours have told us. Yeah. But you have to force them into it. When they're crazy, they don't know they're crazy. But anyway, you'll remember John Lott described, I forget the details, so don't hold me to this, but there were 3 or 4 other movie theaters closer to James Holmes showing the exact same movie, Batman, but he blew off those because they weren't gun-free zones and went to the movie theater that had signs posted all over gun-free zone.
Huh. Well, listen, there's no simple answer to this. And whenever he says gun control and doesn't give you 5 other things, they're not really trying to solve the problem. And Democrats, if the president were to propose some gun control, Democrats would have to get it killed because they need it for the midterm elections as an issue.
I don't think it helps him. I mean, I've noticed even with these telegenic kids, MSNBC is kind of splitting its time between the completely phony Russia investigation and the Parkland shooting. And I mean, my guess is Democrats have to realize if a Democratic Senate could not pass anything on guns after the Sandy Hook shooting, oh my gosh, those little kids, 26 of them, if the country had no appetite, if Democrats in the United States Senate had no appetite for gun regulation back then, I think the Democrats may finally be realizing this isn't a good issue to run on.
Interesting. Speaking of Russia, Mueller indicts another small fish yesterday for something that had absolutely nothing to do with Trump or Russia. When is he going to shut this down?
No, this is really getting out of control. Remember the prosecutor, Patrick Fitzgerald?
Yeah.
a one-time, respectable prosecutor. He gets brought to Washington for the alleged illegal leak of Valerie Plame's name. It was supposed to be Karl Rove. Remember, we kept hearing Karl Rove is going to be marched out of the White House. At the end of that lengthy investigation, it turned out on day one, Patrick Fitzgerald knew no crime had been committed. He knew who had released Valerie Plame's name. It was that guy, Richard Armitage, who opposed the Iraq War. That's the guy who had leaked Valerie Plame's name, but it was not a crime. But that didn't stop him. He didn't just say, okay, done here, no crime was committed. I don't know. He puts lots of people under oath. Scooter Libby's recollection diverges from Time Magazine's Matthew Cooper's recollection. So Scooter Libby gets convicted of perjury. He had to give up his law license. It's unbelievable. Well, this is what Mueller seems to be turning into. There is no underlying crime, so he's just trying to get people committing crimes as a part of the investigation. It's really, I mean, that is the Star Chamber.
Yeah, I mean, it's and in Armitage's defense, he didn't leak it. He just told Bob Novak because he knew that Valerie Plame wasn't undercover. She worked at CIA headquarters, drove in and out of there every day.
Completely, just like Russia, it was a completely invented crime. There was no crime there.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. I didn't mean to suggest that Richard Armitage had done anything wrong. It's just that it wasn't even Karl Rove. It wasn't even Scooter Libby. It was someone who opposed the Iraq War doing something that is not a crime. So why was anyone ever put under oath to say, when did you talk about this, to whom, who told you? There's no crime to investigate, so the only crime is as part of the investigation itself. It's outrageous. It ought to be shut down, this Mueller thing.
Yeah. Well, Ann Coulter, always great talking to you. Everybody get her book. If you haven't gotten her book, In Trump We Trust. Oh, and go back and get the book Adios America. That's the one that Donald Trump read and was quite moved by. Adios America. And your new column comes out tonight?
Yes, for the truly eager, it comes out tonight. Otherwise, you can wait until tomorrow.
So go to AnnCoulter.com or follow Ann Coulter on Twitter or on Facebook. Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us.
Good to talk to you, Mark Simone. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Oscar viewership, 26.5 million. Every year, the population of the United States increases and the viewership of the Oscars goes down. Coincidence? I think not. Joining us now on the line is Ann Coulter, best-selling author. Go ahead, Ann. What's your theory on the decline of the Academy Awards?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I never watch them. I didn't even know they were on last night until one of my friends called me. He was giving me updates. He's a Hollywood guy, giving me updates about every half an hour on their shout-outs to transgenders and intersectionality. So I gathered from his reports to me that the whole Me Too movement got sort of short shrift, and suddenly it became all about immigrants, more blacks in movies, transgenders, and intersectionality. I don't know what any of that has to do with Me Too, but I guess they don't want people to notice. I never hear about this like Harvey Weinstein type stuff in the country music industry. In fact, in the music industry at all, in the modeling industry, in
well, there's a little
bit. I don't know, car manufacturers of America. You never hear about it in professional tennis. It's pretty much isolated to the one industry that has the ugliest men in the universe producing movies and TV shows with some of the hottest babes in the universe. Well, and an entire industry with zero morals.
Well, Ann, I wanted to start off today by talking about the illegal alien of the week. I think you know who I'm talking about. This is in San Diego. Did you see this story? Andres Avelino Anduega, an illegal alien from Mexico previously arrested on gun, drug, and forgery charges. You say, so why is he being singled out when they're being arrested all the time for that kind of stuff? Well, it's more than that. When he pleaded guilty, he admitted that he assumed the identity of a Texas-born American citizen more than 37 years ago in 1980.
Oh.
Using it and 21 other invented or assumed identities, the illegal alien claimed more than $250,000 of SSI, supplemental security income benefits, over $100,000 in public health care benefits, and separately $12,000 in SNAP food stamps, all while being deported twice, arrested on a variety of felony charges, and traveling between Mexico and the United States with impunity with his fraudulently obtained American passport.
We're a nation of immigrants, Howie.
He was only...
That's all they have to say to this nonsense. I mean, this is the world that has been created by immigration, where you have the open borders, alleged Republicans like Paul Ryan saying that's not who we are, to the idea that we should... we're all set on the third world here now. We can cut that spigot off for a while. So we're just going to keep dumping more and more third world immigrants who rip off our government programs and government assistance, and then Paul Ryan turns around and says, oh, well, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, it's bankrupt. We're going to have to raise the retirement age for you Americans. No, I have an idea. How about stop allowing foreigners to rip off our government programs? And then I think there's enough to go around.
Right. SSI, I know it's different than Social Security, but the money all comes out of the same pot. So this guy is in the country illegally, and he's stealing all this money. And at the same time, people like Chris Christie are going around saying, you know what, we're going to have to means test for Social Security. Well, I tell you what, let's get rid of the people like Andres Avelino Anduega first before we start any means testing. Listen to this.
Let's American test for programs that are intended for Americans.
Right. Let me read you some more.
Americans paid into. And this is a special problem of immigration because we are intentionally bringing in people from not only extremely backward cultures, but cultures as different from ours as humanly possible. And, by and large, America was always one of the most honest countries. They do these rankings. You can look it up on Google. I haven't done it for a while, but they do rankings of countries by honesty. And it used to be that America was one of the most honest. That's how you can have all these big government programs and don't have to spend 9 cents of every 10 cents or 90 cents of every dollar looking for fraud and thievery. But we're bringing in people from cultures where it is considered not dishonorable to steal from the government.
Right.
In fact, in some cultures, whoa, that's cool. You ripped off the government for X amount of money. There, as I think I've told you before, in one of the very sick honor-killing stories in that magnificent book, Adios America, that was captured on tape because the FBI was watching the family for another crime. The guy can be the father who murders his daughter with a knife for dating a black boy at high school. He can be heard saying, "Oh, I love America. There's so many government programs to gain."
Let me read you another paragraph here about this guy. He's the illegal alien of the week. Took $361,000 in welfare benefits. The Mexican illegal managed to get a California driver's license, a Social Security card, and a U.S. passport, all the while claiming to be Abraham Riojos, a similar-age Texan later found to be living in Florida and completely unaware that an illegal alien was using his identity to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from the federal government. You know, the worst thing about it, Ann, is some people don't discover that their identity has been stolen until they get into their 60s and they apply for Social Security and they go down to the office to apply and they're told, Mr. Riojos, didn't you already start collecting 5 years ago? And we're sending your checks to Tijuana. You know, I mean, this happens all the time.
Yes, these are serious crimes, and Robert Mueller's worried about Russian bots putting together funny little rallies for and against Hillary Clinton. Yeah.
And I got another story here, which is a related story. It's from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. 35,891 food retailers around the country engaged in food stamp fraud. This was from 2012 to 2014, and it says that privately owned stores accounted for 100% of all welfare fraud, although they account for only 55% of all food stamp redemptions. So these are.
Wait, I don't understand. What does that mean? Privately owned
that
stores?
means little convenience stores,
bodegas.
The mom and
pops. Yeah. Well, I could give you another number on that. Put in on Nexus food stamp fraud and the word Muhammad, and your computer will explode.
Of the 35,891 food retailers that were engaged in food stamp trafficking, only 30 out of 36,000 were supermarkets, and only 42 were large groceries. By contrast, 26,000 were quote-unquote convenience stores. Convenience stores.
Yeah.
And how about this? The report says, this is USDA, Department of Agriculture, the store violation rate rises in accordance with the level of urbanization. The most rural areas have the lowest violation rate. Huh. What's your theory on that, Ann?
Find the rural areas. It'll change there, too. No, I tweeted this out a few weeks ago. I forget what it was in response to. It may have been some idiot, generally Republican, saying we have to raise the retirement age for Social Security or means test it, what you just said. And, in 20 seconds, just put in food stamp fraud. It's stunning the amount of money that is stolen from our government by people you kind of can't blame them. They don't come from a culture where it's considered a bad thing to steal from the government.
Yeah.
But it's a big problem for us. They come to America, and we're like a Disneyland for foreign criminals. This is not a kind of crime our investigators, our police, our government is used to having to investigate. We're used to our own kinds of criminals.
Well, they do occasional investigations of these food stamp fraud at these stores, and I remember they did one a couple of years ago here in Massachusetts, and they had these little stores in Lawrence, which has a heavy immigrant population, and most of the fraud they were moving, quote unquote, they were having more food stamp transactions than giant supermarkets in the suburbs. Yeah,
and it'll take the government like 7 years to notice that.
Right, exactly.
That's what I noticed about on one of the, I think it was a Medicare scam that was written up in the New York Times a few years ago. I assume I put it in Adios America. But it's this home health aid business. They sign up all these people and claim they're sending home health aids. Usually there's not even a storefront where you go and get the home health aid. They're going to homes that don't exist. And in this New York Times report on it, which, like I say, it was like seven years ago, they said that something like 80% of the claims were coming, more than the entire rest of the country combined, were coming from a single county in Florida. And it took them about 10 years to notice something was wrong. How long do you think it would take? I didn't hear him, but he must be a fine fellow. Your UPS guy to figure out if the majority of fraud was coming from a single county in the entire country.
No,
and we're including Hawaii and Alaska. No, the government will get around to that in around a decade.
Hey, Ann, my new book about the campaign. You're in it, by the way. What really happened? I worked on the Hillary Clinton. I'm going to send you a copy of the book. Hang on and talk to Grace, and
we'll
get
a great
your address.
Title.
Yeah, what really happened? How America saved, or how Donald J. Trump saved America from Hillary Clinton. We'll get you a copy out. The book's just arrived today. Hold on and talk to Grace, and we'll get your address and send you a copy of the book. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, thanks,
Okay,
Howie.
thanks. Talk to you next weekend.